I didn't put on much weight during the pandemic, the lockdown and working from home, but I was able to go out for long, long walks, like 8-mile hikes. So I did well. It was after that. And then started putting on more and more weight. And then I just got to a really bad place and I didn't care anymore. Food was always what gave me comfort, but then it made me upset at the same time. So I would eat to feel better and then I would gain weight and feel horrible. So I just kind of gave up for a long time and my weight just went up and up and up. And then I was back at my starting weight, my pre-surgery weight. And I said, this has got to stop. I can't do this anymore. I need help. I don't even know what to do. And I found Jane, and it's been wonderful because it's just my loss so much slower than it was when I first had the surgery, but this is sustainable. And I have techniques and tools now that I never had before.
Welcome to the Bariatric Nutrition Coach podcast, where we empower you with weight loss surgery, nutrition knowledge, mindset advice, and inspiration so you succeed in your weight and health journey. I'm your host, Jane Stoltz, and I am a bariatric dietitian who has helped over 1,300 people on their weight loss surgery journeys. I'm also a solo mum, lover of long walks while listening to podcasts, partial to a glass of wine, and the ocean is my happy place. Join me as I dive deep into bariatric nutrition and lifestyle topics and deliver them to you in bite-sized, palatable episodes every Monday. Now let's go. So welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Bariatric Nutrition Coach podcast. And it's another special episode when I have clients on my podcast. They are past clients and we finish working together and then I invite them to come on my podcast. But I've got the wonderful Alison today, a current client, and we've been working together for, you can correct me, Alison, if I'm wrong, but about 8 months, since about April. And welcome. I was very excited when you said yes to coming on the podcast because I know so many people are going to get a lot of value out of your story because you are a little bit further down the track in your bariatric journey. And I think it's going to inspire many people. So before we get into all the questions that I'm going to ask you and the discussion, I would love you to introduce yourself and share whatever you would like to share.
Okay. So hello, everyone. My name is Alison, and I had gastric sleeve in February of 2018. I had planned for the surgery for about 6 months prior to that. After the surgery, I was very successful. I had started working out before, going boxing, and I absolutely loved it. It was the first time in my life I had ever loved any exercise, and it was great. After the surgery, it was wonderful. I was never hungry, and the weight just fell right off. I'm like, oh, I'm loving this. I did well for about a year. I had stopped boxing. I went through stuff. I moved. Very slowly, the weight started to creep back on. And I remember just before the pandemic, I was probably up about 15 pounds. And I got to call my nutritionist that I had dealt with prior to surgery and maybe go to some of my surgeon's support groups. I started writing down when those were. And then the pandemic happened and we got locked in our houses. I was actually very lucky. I didn't put on much weight during the pandemic, the lockdown and working from home. I was able to go out for long, long, long walks, like 8-mile hikes. I did well. It was after that. And then started putting on more and more weight. I just got to a really bad place and I didn't care anymore. Food was always what gave me comfort, but then it made me upset at the same time. So I would eat to feel better and then I would gain weight and feel horrible. So I just kind of gave up for a long time and my weight just went up and up and up. And then I was back at my starting weight, my pre-surgery weight. And I said, this has got to stop. I can't do this anymore. I need help. I don't even know what to do. And I found Jane, and it's been wonderful because it's just my loss much slower than it was when I first had the surgery, but this is sustainable. I have techniques and tools now that I never had before. So it's been great.
Yes. So thank you, Alison, for sharing that because you said two things I want to comment on. But first, I just want to say, in a nutshell, your story about the early days where you don't have that appetite and the weight comes off, and that really wonderful kind of honeymoon period, I call it, and that very normal life goes on and life happens. And you were a little bit more of the unusual when you didn't gain a lot of weight in COVID, because many people did. You got out and moved your body. But yeah, old habits come back. And it's a really common journey and pathway for many people. But you decided to intervene, you decided to stop and do something and get support, which is wonderful. But I also wrote down comfort and upset. You said food for you was comfort, but also led to upset. And you said it right next to each other, and it's a wonderful connection. You put that so well, because I think that is a very common struggle with emotional eating. And I'll get you to share a little bit more about that. But it's that eating for emotional reasons and then to soothe yourself or whatever. And then straight away, you go into that negative place, that being shame, upset.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'd love you to share a bit more about that as part of your kind of weight regain journey.
Yes. So I've always been overweight my whole life, but I think like eating food always was that comfort, that solace. I like to eat. I like food. I enjoy it. And I don't want to have to curb myself ever, which is really difficult. And then I just stop caring and I eat whatever I want whenever I want. And then, of course, now post surgery, I played the system a little bit. I learned, well, I can eat this, but if I, and I'm full, but if I wait an hour, I can eat more. And that's what I started doing. And I couldn't believe I was doing that. Couldn't believe that I was doing that to myself. But then you eat, and then the results of the eating and the weight gain, and then I just felt horrible about myself even more, and it was just I remember talking to, the first call that we had, and I was in this horrible downward spiral, and I did not know how to stop and get around it. I was almost like I was in a competition with myself. I kept seeing, like, I'd get on the scale and see the scale going up, and I'm looking at my fitness tracker and watching the weight go up and up and up on the graph. I'm like, "What are you doing? Like, trying to see how much weight you can put back on? Are you gonna try and exceed how much you were before the surgery?" So it was a really bad place, but the food would like you said, it gives you comfort, but then it's the cause of your unhappiness as well, or the results of it. So I think a lot of people feel that way.
Definitely. It's that moving, and I know you've heard this before. I don't know if other people have heard me talk about it, but going through kind of eating cycles and what drives going from restrictive eating cycles, overeating, as all those emotions, trying to maybe even in the early part of the day restrict and eat less. And you can't, you get triggered by emotions, then you overeat, you feel shame, and then you go and undereat, and that whole cycle happens. I also think of it like you're spiraling down and you don't quite know how to turn it around because these are old habits. These are eating habits and ways of eating and using food to help manage emotions that many people have been doing for years and years before their surgery. And then you get a bit of reprieve from it, but it comes back because you haven't done the work to really understand your triggers for your emotions and all of that work that we've done. So it's really common, Alison. It is so common. And it's that cycle of feeling shame, feeling bad. You want to soothe your emotions, you use food, and you don't know how to get off. It's really hard and emotional. So thank you so much for sharing that. Well, when we look at, and you've heard me talk about this and other people, we talk about all the behavior change that we want people to do after weight
Mhm.
loss surgery. And that's why there's all things on the social media, like people going, when people say it's the easy way out, like it's not, because we know it's not. What have been maybe the hardest adjustments in your journey so far? What have been the tough things that have come up for you? I mean, the weight regain, but anything else that you found really hard?
Now, the weight regain was the worst thing for me. Losing the weight was great. I know other people sometimes have a hard time adjusting to their new bodies and how they looking in a mirror. And I was like, this is great. Like I had no problems with that. I felt so much better about myself. Although one of the things that I also read, because I had studied up on surgery, I had done the term paper. I had to do a research paper. I was back in school. So I had researched them all. But a lot of people after surgery and losing weight go through relationship changes. And the same thing happened to me. And I think I got myself into a better place and I decided that I no longer wanted to be married to my husband. So that was a big change in my life. I upended everything. So that was difficult. And I think part of it was related to feeling better about myself. And as a result of the surgery and the weight loss and just the exercise, and I was like, I'm just not going to stay in this bad relationship any longer. Like I've worked too hard to make things better. I don't want to stick with this part of it. So that was a big change. Also, some of it was once I was single and living alone, I didn't have to hide eating anymore. I'm sure other people do the same thing. So my husband would go to sleep and I would snack on things. So that I didn't have to hide anything in the house. And that just allowed me to be much freer with going overboard, which was a bad thing. But I just like after the surgery and keeping it off for a year, I felt great. It was wonderful. I loved it. I went on a big vacation with some friends. It was the first time I'd gotten pictures back and looked at pictures, and I wasn't like, oh, I look horrible. I was like, look how much better I look in these photos than I would have, or that I had looked in the past. I'm like, I look great. And other people probably looked at me and said that I was still overweight, but I don't care. I know what I used to look like. I thought I looked fantastic. I was down in like regular size clothes. I wasn't in plus sizes anymore. I was so happy. I was strong. So that was great.
It's lovely to get to that place and obviously value of yourself and wanting to move into a happier place. Touching on relationships changing after weight loss surgery, I don't think it's talked about enough. It does get talked about to a degree, but that was a really significant change for you, Alison. Other people can have changes in relationships that aren't as significant, but dynamics with friends and family and people finding themselves and feeling more confident can be quite triggering for many people around them.
Yeah.
That's a really great thing to be aware of. And how can you be prepared for that? Even if you read about it and kind of hear about it, you don't know how people in your life or how you're going to feel. That's why there's so many unknowns after bariatric surgery because you don't know how you're going to feel. So thank you for sharing that. What do you think were the key you shared about when you live alone? You don't have to eat. You've got that freedom. And I suppose you went through that kind of like moving out of home period of like, I can do whatever I want and all of that. What do you think were the keys? So emotional eating, any other kind of key things, just coming back to that kind of triggered that with the regain? Anything else that played a part?
Well, and I think it was a few years after the divorce, because shortly after I got divorced and moved out was when COVID happened. And then I was like, just, oh, thank God I'm not still living with him because this would be horrible. Like, I'm so glad I got out when I did. So I think it was being alone. It became a big trigger for me. I would realize I'm like, I never want to get married again, really don't have any desire to be in a relationship. But as I was gaining more and more weight, I was like, I'm never, even if I just wanted to meet somebody for casual, like I don't like how I look. Nobody's going to date me. So it became this, oh my God, I'm 58 and I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And I'm like, ugh. So that became very triggering also because then I'm like, oh, poor me, I put on another 10 pounds. And then like that's where it just all came together. I'm like, I don't care if I ever date casually or not. It just seems like a horrible thing to date at this point in my life. I just can't even.
And you've got your cat.
Yeah, no, I know. It's not the same. Not a crazy cat lady, I promise.
I know. While I remember, can you share your non-scale victory about your cat and your couch? Just
Okay, so other people can probably relate to this as well, and either with a human or another type of animal. But I like to, when I watch TV, I lay down on the couch and I get comfortable. And my cat used to lie next to me, and then I gained so much weight, and so did she. We could not lay next to each other on the couch. So now that I have lost 40 pounds, The cat and I can fit next to each other on the couch when I lay on my side. So she doesn't have to lay on top of me or whatever. It's just, I mean, it's silly, but other people have probably experienced the same thing with a partner, with a dog, with a child. Being able to share a space with somebody comfortably.
I hadn't heard that non-scale victory before, but no, it's really sharing a space, beautiful. And it's such a tangible victory as well. So you got pretty low, you didn't know how to spiral down, you reached out for help. So let's talk about the work we've been doing together and the benefits and how we've gone through lots together and you've been on holiday and you've now moved into a new job. And I feel I know you fairly well, but let's start from the beginning. What are some of the things that I know that we're sharing for other people, some of the things that we worked on?
Meal plans, planning things out, having meals done. The nutritionist before my surgery, like, here's your list of proteins and your carbs and your things, but there was nothing to put it all together. And I'm like, well, if I knew how to do this, I wouldn't be fat in the first place. I have a hard time planning out my meals. So while you didn't put them together for me, I put together things, but you reviewed them and you always had such great suggestions. Having meatballs as a snack, I was like, oh, that's genius. And when I was looking to add more fiber, you're like the rye crisps with your cottage cheese or with avocado. I'm like, genius.
I'm like, yeah.
And we've spoken about this going through the lesson plans in your system and the 2 to 1 bites. I'm like, how has nobody come up with this? Like, why isn't this information that you got to publish a book, Jane? I mean, this stuff is out. Like, nobody has ever said to me, eat your protein, have 2 bites of protein, then have a 1 bite of other. I'm like, oh, light bulb. It was great. And doing the weekly check in. And sometimes I don't want to do it because sometimes I may not feel like I have a win. And maybe I have more, and then maybe it's like the same struggles week after week after week because I never change my behavior. But going through those, doing the modules and then doing the self assessment and redoing the self assessments. And I'm due to go through that again. And for me, it was facing my issues and addressing them and being aware of, I always knew I ate emotionally, but really pointing it out. And you'd be like, when you start to feel like you want something, stop. Think about it. Why do you want to eat? Are you just thirsty? Is it a craving? Are you really hungry? What's going on emotionally? So I stop and would think about things and be like, oh, yeah, work is kind of like stressing me out right now. Of course, I'm getting up and heading into my fridge because I'm looking for some comfort. I'm looking for that. So you really helped me identify these things so that I can try and work on them on my own. Yes, which is great because you're a nutrition, you're not a therapist, although you have helped a lot because a lot of stuff is just really facing it instead of denying it or just like pushing it aside and shoving some potato chips in my face. I've had to face some things. Yeah, which has been so helpful.
Lovely. Now, thank you for sharing that. And that's one of my goals that my clients leave with. I call them skills and tools in their toolkit that you can use for the rest of your life. Because the traditional bariatric dietitian is, yeah, pieces of paper and follow this and follow that. And it's not developing new skills and awareness. And you were talking about the self-reflection. And in the program, we have different points where we do a little self-audit about some of the key eating areas of key habits. And it's great to stop every now and again and say, how am I going with compassion? We always do it with compassion. How am I going there? And what am I doing well? And where can I work on? And when we do that, those self-audits regularly, we really can also see our progress because human nature is we want to get to our end goal before we give ourselves even a pat on the back. Sometimes people say, no, I need to do more before I give myself a pat on the back. We don't want to give ourselves and celebrate those small wins, those small steps forward. And we need to, because really the journey is lifelong. There's no end journey. There's no end point. It's around establishing eating habits, challenging your mindset, challenging the way you see your body and food, and doing that in nice small steps going forward. Are you going to take a step back? Yes, you are. And that's why I call myself coach, even though I am a dietitian, because my approach is coaching and not like I educate, I'm a teacher as well, but I'm wanting my clients to learn and getting tools in their toolkit so you can self-assess and with compassion. And I say that all the time because how hard is it sometimes to be compassionate with ourselves? Really hard.
Yes, it is.
It is. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we've just started your third boot camp. So often people say, because they say when you have a program, you've got to give it a name. So I had to come up with a name, boot camp. And then people often think that there's, well, what happens at the end? Well, when people get to the end, some people say, I'm going to go off and fly on my own, I call it. Lovely, where I am if you need it. Other people like yourself go, well, I've got these certain goals, I've kind of hit these, achieved so much, but I know I want to achieve more.
Mm-hmm.
And we renew. So we go, okay, well, what is the next 4 months going to look like? And we are heading towards you going to a wonderful overseas holiday next year that you're with. It's beautiful. So I would love to ask you, what are some of the goals or what's some of the really key things that you've achieved so far in working in the boot camp?
So, aside from the weight loss and also focusing though, like getting me off the scale, right? So, years of being obsessed with the scale. So, that was really difficult for me at first to like twice a week. You only want me to do it once a week. And I'm like, no, I can't. I got to do at least two.
Yeah.
That was very difficult, but also much better. But I'll tell you, it's still that relationship with the scale. And I try to focus on the non-scale victories, but it's difficult. I got on the scale because Tuesday morning's one of the days I weigh in. And this morning, and I was like, oh, it didn't budge. I was so frustrated.
Mm.
And I'm like, it's fine. You've got the new job. I've been eating more because now I'm doing the afternoon snack where I wasn't before. I had to going from working at home to working in the office and commuting. We had to adjust my meal plan and my timing. But I've been exercising so much more because I've been walking like 3 miles a day. So I'm like, okay, I will talk with myself that the scale it's just a number and my activity has increased. My food is still good. I'm okay. Like it's okay that it didn't show in the scale. But I had to talk myself through that because I was so when it's like off and on the scale, off and on, off and on. You want to know that can't be right. So that was very helpful. Now I've
On,
lost track of
on that, you've lost 40 pounds
40 pounds.
being in the boot camp, beautiful. I want to say, and this is for you, but also for listeners, it is really normal for weight loss, stop and start. And we can hear it in our head, but we've got to also hear it in our heart and really get it. And I love that self-talk of you, because those old dieting of that wanting to see, we want to see a result every time we hop on. And I do, I think it surprises people when I talk about not weighing yourself so often, because we get so fixated on the scale, and the scale and weight loss is a lag measure. We want to focus more on the present, on the daily habits. And just so, Alison, when people increase their activities significantly, because you have gone from, and I don't know if we were counting steps before, but you're really like, were you 12,000 a day now?
Not even. I was probably getting like 500 steps a day working
Before.
at home and sitting. Yeah, I was doing nothing. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
moving around much at all. Now I have to walk almost half a mile from my car to my office. It's uphill on the way in.
Yeah.
I'm taking stairs. I work on the fourth floor or coming in from the lower level on the fifth floor, and they're double staircases. So I try and take the stairs when I can. I'm walking at lunch. So I know that activity is also building mass with muscle, right? So my muscles are being used. And it's hard sometimes.
And also, what will happen when you increase your activity? Because this is only the last week or so that you've changed from working from home to the office. What will happen is often you'll notice even your clothes getting a little bit looser before it registers on the scale. So I love the talk of you talking yourself kind of around and really addressing It's kind of like there's two parts and that old of like, oh, but the scales are everything. And if it doesn't move, then da 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 da. The devil and the angel on the shoulder. And so your angel needs to get louder and saying, this is, and so I love that. I talk a lot about relationship with the scales because they can have so much power. And it's very normal also for them to go up and down a bit. So if it goes up a little bit, that can trigger people into self-sabotage. We don't want to be triggered. Also, your weight doesn't change exactly from day to day. We need to get some space in between. So I think that was a wonderful example.
Yeah.
And looking at the non-scale victories, we want to flesh those out. And you have the scale, that was a significant thing you changed. You've had wonderful weight loss. Your protein intake has gone up significantly.
One of the other things that, and you said this right from the beginning, it's what you do most often. So the nutrition plan or the meal plan when I left my surgeon was I can never drink milk again. I can never have alcohol ever again. Certain things. And it was just very, very strict. And I was like, what do you mean I can never have a drink again? I'm like, I can have a drink if I want to have a drink. But it was a long time before I had a drink. But I like having a glass of wine. And I know it has absolutely no health benefit. It's empty calories and it's poison or whatever. But it just, sometimes I want a glass of wine. And so when I was talking to you about that, and you're like, it's what you do most.
Mm.
And I don't think that I had ever heard that. And I see that more on social media now. It's what you do most, try being consistent. So yeah, you're going to have days, but if you have a day where you go off plan or just throw it all away, what's your saying? Just chuck it or no.
Out the window. So are there days where like you lost the cat, the car breaks down, like you stub your toe, whatever, something happens, and you just say, I'm just over this whole thing.
Yes. And so that day is done and you don't stop all your progress because of one bad day or one bad meal or one bad snack. And so if I go out with my friend and we go out to dinner and I have a glass of wine or maybe two, it's fine because the next day I am back on track. And I had a night out with a friend and we had a lot of laughs. And it was like a little treat. Usually I don't have dessert, I have wine instead. But yeah, so I think that was it. It was what you do most often.
What you've just talked about is balance. And that is where we want to get to. I'm working online now and I have clients all over the world. I have heard so many things that people have been told in their pre-surgery educations or from their bariatric surgeon or centre. And we can never have this again, never have that again. Kind of like, you'll never have takeaway again. It's kind of like your life's over. And because there is so much discomfort and they want to change their lives, they still decide to go through the surgery. But in reality, that is not realistic. That is restriction. And what happens is when you say you can never have anything again, what do you think about? You think about that. And ultimately, in the early days, we're really leveraging the tool, the surgery, the drop in appetite and taste changes and all of that to optimize. We want to get the best out of our surgery, but ultimately, we want to find that place of balance because that's where you don't feel deprived, you don't feel that restriction. And that part of you goes, it's okay, I can have things sometimes. We find that new intuitive eating cycle where all foods fit. And I don't feel like I'm not eating something for emotional reasons and I'm eating things because I enjoy things, but I can have a small amount and I can enjoy it. There's no shame, there's no after effect. And I can go out with my friends and have a couple of glasses of wine, have a wonderful time and feed the soul, so to speak, and have that balance. So it's not tipping you a little bit out of your plan to that black all or nothing kind of thinking of like, now I'm off track, I'm just going to do whatever I want. It can take really some time to get there, Alison. Sometimes it can take a lot to get where you are, but that's ultimately what we want to get to because we can't never have this ever again. It just doesn't work. And then people, they have a little bit of something and they feel like they're a failure and they feel like it's just them and it's not just them. So I'm very passionate about that because I've heard you said you surgeons can't have milk. I'm like, what's that about? Yeah, so it's interesting because different bariatric centres, different bariatric surgeons have different views, and a lot of things that can be given as guidelines aren't really evidence-based.
Mhm.
So is there evidence to say drinking a lot of alcohol in your weight loss phase can slow down weight loss? Yes, a glass of wine here or there is not going to do it. We don't want to go back to regular drinking. But when you get to your weight maintenance and more kind of that longer term, what does balance look like? When you see you have it occasionally and you're just coming back to what you said, I say a lot of time, it's what you do most of the time that
Mhm.
impacts your health and your weight. And finding balance is that freedom. But that is where you get there when you trust your body and you trust food again. And most people that are bariatric surgery not trusting food, and people get so connected to counting calories on apps, not listening to their hunger and fullness cues. And we've done lots of work around you listening to your body and getting a better sense of what it's saying to you. So that's a wonderful, that's finding balance. That's everyone's got their different words for it. That's how I say it, but just know that you can think of it in a different way or have different words for it. But that's ultimately where we want to get to.
Right. Yes. And that makes me feel so much better about myself. I think I put in my tracker and I've told you that I really wanted potato chips one day. So pre working with Jane, I would have bought a family sized bag of potato chips and I would have eaten it all. And instead, I bought a single serving and I was like, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to eat a single serving bag of chips and I'm going to enjoy them and then I'm going to move on. And it was great. It got me over the craving. It was a small bag, so it didn't do any damage. Not that it wasn't eating a family sized bag of chips by myself. So it was a small change, but it meant that was a big deal for me to be able to do that and just be like, all right, I can buy a little bag of chips and that will be enough to hold me over.
Beautiful. And that is that learning to trust yourself that you can eat them slowly, enjoy them, and go, oh, I can feel satisfied at the end of a small amount. That's a wonderful example. And then it's practice. And it's a bit like a practice of a muscle. We practice that and we get better at it. Then it becomes more default, more of a habit that when you do feel like something like that. And that's ultimately what we want to get to. And that's really wonderful, Alison.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for this wonderful chat. It's always lovely chatting to you. And if there's anything that's come up that you'd like to share to wrap up the conversation, anything else, because you've got lots of wisdom, because you've been through the ups and the downs, and you took things into your own hands to get support, turn things around. And over that since 2018, a lot's happened.
Yes. A lot has happened.
A lot has happened in your life, in the world, but also in your life. So is there anything that you'd like to finish up with?
So for listeners that have went through the same thing where you have that guilt or shame that you've regained weight, I recommend if you haven't worked with Jane, do it. It's been so helpful. It really turned me around. And if you're having surgery or just have had it and you're working with Jane, you're very lucky because she'll get you on the right track. But if you find yourself starting to put some weight on, you have to stop and reevaluate then and really focus on it because that was the whole point of the surgery. And I was like, oh, how do people have this surgery and go through all that and then put all that weight back on? Well, I can tell you it's very easy because you have to learn how to address your relationship with food. And it's really helped having meal plans, shopping, making out my meal list, shopping for them, preparing my food, having a snack now when I drive home from work so I don't walk in the door and head like right into the refrigerator and be like, what can I eat? So you provide some excellent, excellent tools and guidance. And I really recommend if people are listening to the podcast but haven't reached out to you yet, most definitely do it. Do it. Don't wait. Don't keep putting on more weight. Just call Jane and do it.
Thanks, Alison. Thank you. And it is, that's a great point to end on. It's a lot easier to stop weight regain than lose it. So I call it being in but addressing it early and knowing that you're not alone. So often people don't go, and reach out for support because they think they feel shame and disappointment themselves. There's so much emotion attached to that weight regain. So thank you so much. Thank you for being so generous and coming on the podcast and sharing your thoughts and your journey, because people get a lot of value out of hearing other people's stories. That helps people connect, people all over the world because it goes global, but somebody could be very isolated in their little town somewhere and they listen, they go, that really resonates with me. I'm not alone. And that's part of the reason why I do my podcast. So thank you so much, Alison,
Yes.
for being
Thank you
on.
so much for asking me to be on. This was wonderful.
You are so welcome and so brave, because it's really brave to get on and talk about your journey. So thank you everyone also for listening. I really appreciate your support. I have had such wonderful feedback for my podcast, which is really very humbling for me. If you would like to, I would love you to subscribe and also go and leave me a review. Give me, people say in their podcast like 5-star review. I want you to give me the review that you want me to have, but any feedback or any review would be wonderful. It helps people decide to listen to my podcast. So thank you so much, and I look forward to being back in your ears next week. Bye for now.